State your name for the record. The man in worn boots and a shredded coat looked up from the defense table. He did not flinch, did not shake. He just said 2 words slowly. The judge stared at the name on the file, then set her pen down and stood up. And in front of a silent courtroom, she walked out without saying another word. If that gave you chills, comment respect for the forgotten warriors who never had to raise their voice to be remembered. Monday mornings in Judge Elena Reeves's courtroom were always the same. A procession of weekend arrests, petty crimes, minor offenses that required major patience. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everyone in the same unflattering pour. The courtroom was not cold in temperature. The heating system worked too well, in fact. But there was a chill in the atmosphere. The mechanical processing of human lives. Case numbers instead of stories. Next on the docket, the clerk announced, shuffling papers with practiced efficiency. Case 247B. A few heads turned as the bailiff called the name, though most remained fixed on phones or whispered conversations. The regulars, public defenders, prosecutors, court reporters barely looked up. Another nameless face, another slot in the schedule. But something about this man made the bailiff hesitate as he approached. Perhaps it was the layers of mismatched clothing despite the warm courtroom. Perhaps it was the distant look in eyes that seemed to be seeing something else entirely, something far away from this room. He shuffled forward slowly, not with reluctance, but with the measured pace of someone who had learned that rushing never changed outcomes. His boots were worn through at the edges, laces replaced with what looked like twisted plastic bag handles. A beard, more gray than brown, covered most of his face. His hands, when they emerged from coat sleeves, were calloused and weather-beaten. He smelled of rain and pavement and time spent outdoors. Not the sharp sting of alcohol that often accompanied Monday morning defendants, but the earthier scent of someone who slept under stars instead of ceilings. "Please be seated," instructed the bailiff, gesturing toward the defense table. The man nodded once and sat, his movements careful and deliberate. No wasted energy, no unnecessary gestures. Judge Reeves glanced down at the file. It was thinner than most. Just a single-sheet intake form with handwritten notes. No ID had been produced, no background check completed, just a name scratched onto the line in penmanship that seemed at odds with the man's appearance. Too precise, too structured. Charges are unlawful camping in a public space. She read aloud, not looking up. Third warning within the calendar year. The public defender assigned to the morning docket stepped forward. Young, new, overwhelmed by a caseload that left only minutes for each client. "Your Honor," he began. "My client has refused placement in available shelters. He does not speak much. We believe he may be former military based on a tattoo observed during processing, though he has not confirmed this." Judge Reeves sighed. The sound of someone pacing themselves through a marathon of minor infractions. She had seen dozens like him before, veterans who could not readjust, who found walls confining after years of hypervigilance, who preferred the dangers they could see to the ones that lurked in crowded spaces. "Let us move this along," she said, pen poised above the form. "Sir, I need you to state your name for the record." The courtroom continued its quiet hum of activity. A prosecutor shuffled papers. A court officer checked his watch. The court reporter's fingers hovered above her stenotype machine, waiting for the first time since entering. The man raised his eyes. They were blue, startlingly so against the weathered brown of his skin. Not the vacant stare of someone lost to addiction or mental illness, but clear and focused, present in a way that seemed suddenly incongruent with his physical appearance. He looked directly at Judge Reeves, his gaze unwavering. There was no challenge in it, no defiance, just a strange, quiet dignity that seemed to straighten his spine even as he remained seated. And then he spoke, his voice low but carrying easily through the courtroom. "Andrew Carver," just 2 words spoken slowly, deliberately, as if each syllable carried weight. The room did not react. Names were just procedural necessities, data points for paperwork. But Judge Elena Reeves, she stopped breathing for a moment. Her pen, which had been moving to record the name, stilled against the paper. She reached for the file again, hands suddenly uncertain. The bailiff noticed. He had worked with her for 7 years and had never seen her hesitate. The handwriting on the intake form matched the name just spoken. Andrew Carver. Not a common name, but not extraordinarily unique either. Yet, Judge Reeves was staring at it as if it had been written in flames instead of blue ballpoint ink. Her face changed, color drained from it, as if she had seen a ghost walking through her courtroom walls. Because in a way, she had. 15 years earlier, Elena Reeves had not been a judge. She had been a young law clerk assigned to a federal judge overseeing a classified military tribunal. A case so sensitive that armed guards had stood at every door. A case where testimonies were given behind the screens and names were redacted from all documents. All documents except one shall. A single affidavit that had crossed her desk by mistake. A document she should never have seen. A document with a signature she had memorized knowing she would never speak of it. Andrew Carver. It was not just a name. It was a mission designation, a code word for an operation that officially never existed. Her mind raced through the possibilities. Coincidence, a stolen identity, or was it actually him? The same man whose testimony she had transcribed in a skiff room, whose words had been immediately classified above top secret. She whispered something so quietly that only the bailiff standing beside the bench could hear. That cannot be him. The bailiff leaned closer. Judge, is everything all right? She did not answer. Instead, she studied the man before her. Beneath the beard and the hollow cheeks, could it be the same face? The eyes. Yes, the eyes were the same. That particular shade of blue that had seemed so at odds with the horrors he had recounted in that other courtroom years ago. The public defender shifted uncomfortably in the silence that had stretched too long. Your Honor, should we proceed with the charges? But Judge Reeves was not listening. Her mind was 15 years in the past, remembering fragments of testimony about extraction operations in territories where American forces officially never set foot, about decisions made when all options were impossible ones, about sacrifices that could never be acknowledged. She remembered the voice, the oath, the way he had stood ramrod straight despite the chains. Andrew Carver was not just a man facing minor charges on a Monday morning. He was a ghost. The system had failed, a mission the country had abandoned. Your Honor, the prosecutor prompted, confused by the delay. But Judge Reeves had already made her decision. Judge Elena Reeves removed her reading glasses with deliberate care. The thin wire frames caught the fluorescent light. As she folded them and placed them precisely beside her gavel, her hands, noticed the court reporter, were trembling slightly. She folded her hands on the bench, fingers interlaced so tightly the knuckles whitened. For a long moment, she simply looked at the man who called himself Andrew Carver, studying him, seeing beyond the layers of worn clothing and hardship to something underneath. Mr. Carver, she finally said, her voice different now. Not the efficient, slightly detached tone of a judge processing cases, but something more human, more troubled. I am dismissing this case. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor straightened in his chair, confused. The public defender blinked rapidly, wondering if he had misheard. The man, Carver, tilted his head slightly, just one word. Why? That single syllable held no gratitude, no relief, just genuine confusion, as if leniency was more suspicious than punishment. Judge Reeves's answer came quietly but clearly, carrying to every corner of the suddenly silent room. Because I do not belong behind this bench. Not when you are in front of it. She stood up, an unusual action in the middle of proceedings. The motion was abrupt enough that the bailiff took an instinctive step forward, unsure if something was wrong. Your Honor, the prosecutor began, half rising from his seat. Judge Reeves looked to her clerk. Strike these charges from the record. Expunge everything related to this case immediately. The prosecutor found his voice and his footing. Judge Reeves, with all due respect, this is highly irregular. The defendant has multiple warnings for the same offense. There are protocols. She cut him off with a gesture that was more military than judicial. Sharp. Final. Do you know who he is, counselor? A vagrant with repeated violations of Municipal Code 15.3, the prosecutor replied, gesturing to his case notes. Wrong. The word cracked like a gavel, though she had not touched the wooden instrument. She pointed directly at Carver, who remained seated, his expression unreadable beneath the beard. This man ran covert search and extraction operations through enemy lines in 2004. He lost half his team, so we could evacuate an embassy that was never officially threatened. And he signed a non-disclosure agreement that does not expire until 2085. The silence in the courtroom deepened. Even the ever-present hum of the heating system seemed to fade away, But the prosecutor's confidence wavered. How could you possibly know that? Judge Reeves reached down to her briefcase, not the official one containing the day's dockets, but her personal one. With steady hands now, she withdrew a slim black file, the only physical reminder she had ever kept from her early clerkship. Not the contents. Those remained locked in a skiff somewhere in Virginia, but the folder itself with its distinctive marking in the corner. Because I was there, she said quietly, when he gave testimony in a room we had to sweep for bugs 3 times a day. I was there when he recounted actions that saved 37 American lives while wearing chains because the mission itself was disavowed. She placed the empty folder on the bench, a symbol only she and Carver would understand. This man has been failed by the very system he protected, and I will not be another link in that chain of failure. The prosecutor had no response. The public defender looked at his client with new eyes, seeing him properly for the first time. Andrew Carver stood slowly, his posture changed, the stooped shoulders straightening. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable, like watching someone step back into a uniform they had not worn in years. I did not come here for favors, Judge, he said, his voice carrying the weight of authority despite his appearance. And you are not getting one, she replied without hesitation. You are getting overdue respect, and I am giving this court the opportunity to do the right thing for once. With that, she stepped down from the bench, not toward her chambers at the side, but straight ahead, walking past the attorneys' tables toward the main doors of the courtroom. She paused briefly beside Carver. Words were exchanged that no one else could hear. Then she continued walking, pushing through the double doors without looking back. For several seconds, no one moved. The court machinery, so accustomed to its relentless forward motion, had completely stalled. Then the bailiff, a 20-year veteran of the sheriff's department, stood at attention. The court reporter followed, rising to her feet. One by one, everyone in the courtroom stood, a silent recognition that transcended legal procedure, rank, or station. Everyone stood for the one who had stood for them when it mattered most. Andrew Carver walked out of the courthouse into the bright winter morning. The sun was harsh against his eyes after the filtered light of the courtroom. He squinted slightly, adjusting the worn cap on his head, a habit from years when identifying features could mean the difference between life and death. The street was busy with the normal Monday traffic. Office workers hurried past with coffee cups. Cars jockeyed for position at the intersection. No one paid any attention to another homeless man leaving the halls of justice. Whether by freedom or further condemnation made little difference to the passing world. But there was a car waiting, black, unmarked, windows tinted just enough to blur the figures inside without drawing undue attention. It had been parked there for precisely 17 minutes. As Carver descended the courthouse steps, the rear passenger door opened. A man in a dark blue uniform stepped out. No insignia visible, no name tag, but the posture was unmistakable. Military through and through. Sir, he said simply, his voice pitched low. It is time. Carver stopped, his weathered face revealing nothing. Time for what? For you to stop disappearing. The uniformed man's tone was respectful but firm. We have been looking for you for 3 years since Algeria. A flicker of something crossed Carver's features. Recognition, perhaps, or weariness. We have prepared a place, the man continued. Quiet, private. You will not be bothered there, but we need your expertise one last time. The answer is still no. Sir, with respect, times have changed. What happened in 04 has been reconsidered at the highest levels. Carver stood motionless, weighing invisible options, calculating risks as he had done in mountains and deserts and jungles where wrong choices meant unmarked graves. Finally, he nodded once. A decision made. He got into the car without another word. The door closed. The vehicle merged into traffic and was gone. Another ghost returning to the shadows where some of the nation's most important work is done. Back in the courthouse an hour after her unprecedented departure, Judge Elena Reeves returned to courtroom 3. The docket had been reassigned. The room was empty now. She carried her judicial robe folded carefully over her arm. With measured steps, she walked to the clerk's office and placed an envelope on the desk. Inside, her formal resignation effective immediately. May I ask why, Your Honor? The clerk asked, genuinely distressed. Judge Reeves had been respected, efficient, fair. She offered a small smile that did not reach her eyes. Because there are different ways to serve justice. I have been reminded of that today. The court did not understand. Rumors spread as they always do. Theories about breakdowns, about ethical violations, about secret illnesses. None came close to the truth. But later that week, maintenance workers installed a new plaque in the courthouse hallway. No ceremony accompanied it. No explanation was offered. It simply appeared, brass letters catching the morning light. To those who served where records do not reach and still carry what history refuses to print. Some said Judge Reeves had ordered it before leaving. Others claimed it came directly from the state office. A few insisted they saw a man in military clothes overseeing its installation in the early morning hours. The truth, like so many things in a world of secrecy and service, remained hidden. But the plaque remained, a reminder to silent sacrifices, to debts that can never be publicly acknowledged, to heroes who ask for nothing, not even to be remembered. Because some stories are written not in records or awards or headlines, but in the quiet spaces between heartbeats of a country that sleeps safely unaware of its guardians. Because some heroes never stop serving.